Birthers, there's a new presidential conspiracy theory. It's called the Girther movement. It emerged yesterday after President Trump's doctor discussed his physical results, and he described the president's health as pretty good.
Age 71 years and 7 months at the time of the exam. Height 75 inches. Weight 239 pounds. I think the president, he and I talked, and he would like to lose over the next, I think a reasonable goal over the next year or so is to lose 10 to 15 pounds.
So it was a pretty good report, but it was immediately brushed aside by a lot of the press corps. They speculated about what hidden ailments the president might have. Watch.
But if that's what 6'3", 239 pounds looks like, it's a shock to me.
He seemed like a Trump fanboy.
When he said 239 pounds.
Whatever, but I mean...
I know I'm being a girther, but I mean...
We know, as you mentioned, the president has high cholesterol. We know he has evidence of heart disease. We know he's borderline obese.
On his driver's license in New York, he was 6'2", and he suddenly grew with age.
Most old people shrink.
Yes, exactly.
The thing that's spurning sort of this girther movement is this idea that if he did in fact grow, that's part of the reason that he's not being considered obese. If he had been 1 inch shorter, then he would have met the BMI standards for obesity.
It shows you how physically cut off the press corps is from the rest of the country. Here's NBC producer Ken DeLion. Ken, we'll call him that. He demanded that Trump submit to a public weigh-in. He tweeted, seeing a lot of skepticism over the idea that Trump weighs only 239 pounds. Would he step on a scale in public to prove that? Brian Kilmeade is a host at Fox & Friends, author of the fantastic book, Andrew Jackson and the Miracle of New Orleans, and he joins us tonight. So, Brian, I mean, the one thing I learned from watching the coverage is most reporters live in neighborhoods without a single person who doesn't go to SoulCycle at least 4 times a week. They've never seen a fat person. They think Trump is obese.
Well, listen. He had a doctor, a real admiral, come out who impressed the Bush family and the Obama family and their respective staffs and didn't know Donald Trump at all before he ran for president and won the White House. He came out and said, here's a thorough exam. I mean, the same media corps that missed FDR's wheelchair and Woodrow Wilson's stroke and the back problems of JFK finally got a full exam and a 55-minute presser to follow where every question was answered, and they zero in on his height, which would reveal too much weight. Americans sometimes should lose 10 to 15 pounds. He is sadly healthy. This is the bad news for the press corps, as I understand it. This morning, Tucker, I thought the big story was the crazy questions asked of that doctor. Later on, when the show ends, I find out everyone doubts the validity and the sanctity of the doctor's comments, and they want a public weigh-in. If Hillary Clinton had won in this age of equality and political correctness, would we have done the pinch test on her? Would we have asked for her weight and demand a second source? This is incredible. In the age of political correctness, we are fat-shaming a president who simply has to lose 10 to 15 pounds. Were they rooting for disease? They were rooting for something to stop him from being president.
It just tells you everything about their world, where being 10 pounds overweight really is a sin, though. I mean, I actually think a lot of reporters are upset by this. The idea that, you know, a 71-year-old man might be mildly overweight, I mean, that's like worse than a war crime to them. I mean it.
I'll take it up a notch. From the group of people that wanted Jill Stein to contest the election because it was fraud, wrong. Then they wanted delegates to flip. That never happened. Then the Russia investigation ongoing hasn't yielded anything. Then the 25th Amendment fell flat on its face because the president's sane. And then all of a sudden it turns out he might live through his term and not die of an illness. And they are so upset they're demanding a recount. This is incredible. I mean, you can't have it every single way. I've never seen people so disappointed that he wasn't riddled with disease. And he, for some reason, I think at some point is watching your show and laughing out loud as he was that entire press conference.
I hope he's eating a cheeseburger and chasing it with the Three Musketeers bar. I do. I mean, there's something so transgressive about his eating habits in this age of macrobiotic orthodoxy. I just love it. Good for him. Brian Kilmeade, it is great to see you.
I don't know if you read the New York Times, but page 8 had the tax plan, the economic values, and the unemployment numbers, all good news. They might want to focus on that, not his weight, but I don't want to tell anyone what to focus on. That's what people might care about.
That's the spirit. Thank you, Brian. Great to see you.
See.
Congressman, thank you. Rather, Congressman.
Well, maybe in the future.
I hope you'll announce on this show, Professor. Good to see you. Chadwick
Absolutely.
Moore is
Thank
a
you.
journalist in New York City, home of Brooklyn, and people who write for BuzzFeed, and he joins us tonight. Chadwick, I know I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I can kind of picture the staffer in question sneering at the middle of the country and maligning an entire group based on their skin color, which I thought was not allowed.
Right. Yeah, I don't believe your guest for one second when he thinks, your former guest, when he says he thinks that these articles are meant to be satire and make fun of racism. No. It's exactly, I think, how you painted it. These sort of liberal Oberlin kids who graduated and live in Brooklyn and for some reason want to believe in this sort of dismantle the wealth narrative, and they think the way to do that is to attack white people. I mean, it's Marxism, it's socialism, and it has the mainstream media's ear. It has mainstream society's ear. When you see these people who obsess over victimhood so much, it's so fascinating, because if you want to see racism everywhere, if you're brainwashed to see racism everywhere, or homophobia everywhere, or whatever, then you will. That's the world you will live in. You know, I was having a conversation with a woman not too long ago about this, a young upper middle class black woman, and she was talking about how badly she gets treated on the street here in New York. And I said to her, what if you lived for one day as a white woman and you were treated the exact same way? People were just as rude to you. What then?
Yeah, it doesn't make anybody happier to see everything through that lens. So let me ask you about something that happened yesterday on The View. I personally missed it, but I've seen the tape. Maybe you saw. Co-host Joy Behar reacted to the ongoing protests we've been seeing in Iran by saying the U.S. is on the very brink of executing gay people in the streets. Watch this.
It's not apples and apples. It's not equal. But we're on a very slippery slope in this country toward throwing democracy out the window every single day.
We have to defend the freedom of the press and civil rights here.
We do, but we're not being stoned in the street for being gay.
Not yet. They're completely.
Now, how close do you think we are to a country where people are stoned in the streets for being gay, as Joy Behar suggests?
Look, I have to tell people this all the time. We can't even get funding for the wall, so the gay death camps are definitely not happening till the second term. I mean, we really have some time to battle this. She's completely ridiculous. This narrative that they want to push is so absurd. There's no proof to it. It's total, it's just such a load of bull. I don't know, in that same discussion, she was sort of ironically saying that the protesters in Iran and the so-called women's marchers here, these resist protesters, she called them protesters, are basically fighting for the same thing. And she said, well, the details are different about what they're fighting against. But the general thing, that they want democracy and freedom, and ours is deeply under attack in this country. All right, well, firstly, let's talk about that. In Iran, you have women tearing off their headscarves and in their hijabs. And here in New York and in Washington, you have women and men, liberal men, putting them on as a symbol of liberation.
Of course.
And when she says, it's so funny to see her saying our democracy is under attack.
But it's also, I mean, it's such grotesque overstatement. And I know what it's like to get mad on television, but part of your brain says, pull back a little bit. Don't say more than you mean. Don't overstate things grotesquely, because if you do, you're going to be called on it. And you shouldn't say things that aren't true. No one ever calls anybody on the left when they say ludicrous things like gays are about to be stoned in the streets. What?
Yeah, exactly. It's just this hysteria, and they have no evidence for it. They have absolutely no evidence for it, and it's exactly, they're just showing who they are. They have no argument.
It's childish.
Yeah, it's very childish.
Chadwick Moore, great to see you.
All right, thank you, Tucker.
Thanks. Berkeley. CNN's Don Lemon suggested that Antifa is a fever dream invented by us. Watch.
His obsession with Antifa, I don't understand. He has an unhealthy obsession with Antifa, and maybe it's because Fox News. I watch Fox News, and I've been watching Fox News for years, but lately they are obsessed with Antifa and with stories about race and pitting. Is the president being manipulated by Fox News on these stories?
Old Don Lemon. Love Don Lemon. But he's not alone, by the way. Whoopi Goldberg of The View says Antifa isn't merely overblown, it's an outright fabrication. Watch.
Antifa is one of those things that, I don't want to say the right, but somebody came up with as a catchphrase so that you could say, oh, there is violence on the other side. But I don't remember violent demonstrations before the gentleman who's in now got in. But oftentimes I've found that sometimes the side that is scratching the loudest has sort of orchestrated this so they can bitch about it.
Who watches that show? Well, to help us sort out what is real and what is fake, what's a Potemkin protest group, we're joined by townhall.com senior columnist Kurt Schlichter. Kurt, is it possible, and I've actually heard people suggest this, some elected officials, that Antifa, beneath the masks, they're all townhall.com readers?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like to mask up and go beat people on the head with a bike lock. No, really, it's all an illusion, Tucker. You're pulling the strings on the president. You're convincing them that there's not really crowds of little junior anarchists and angry suburban rich kids acting out their fantasies on our streets. No, it's all an illusion. And look, I've had run-ins with Don Lemon in the past, and after listening to what he said, you know, you always have to wonder, has Don been drinking again? And after hearing him say that, I'm kind of hoping he has, because that's the only possible explanation for that string of words that was so transcendently stupid that my head's still spinning. I don't know if I can drive home.
So I've always, I can't help myself. I like Don Lemon. I still like Don Lemon, but I don't think he's responsible for what he said. But there's a conservative radio show host who took a ton of heat for suggesting that one tragedy was, you know, made up, that there were actors involved in it. I hear mainstream media figures basically making the same argument right here, that this is some conspiracy, that these left-wing agitators, violent ones, are actually right-wingers. It seems every bit as insane to me.
Well, I think it's right up there with fire can't melt steel as the kind of idiotic insight that makes me want to completely redo our education system from K all the way to graduate school. I mean, how dumb do they think we are, Tucker? I know how dumb they probably think the people who follow them are, and they're right. But how dumb do they think us normal people are? Do they think we really don't believe that these guys are doing this?
And you're absolutely right about our education system. What do we think is going to happen when you turn it over to lunatics? Kurt,